What's up, folks? Let's talk about CI Wild Strike of Extremes, a very fun combination of things you can do this league as a result of the new Runesmithing enchants. Specifically, the one that does Insufficient Life doesn't prevent your melee attacks. Now, those of you that know something about Wild Strike of Extremes know that it has a very high cost, and it has a cost of all three of the normal cost modifiers: Energy Shield, Life, and Mana. So you're paying all three of those costs. But with this rune enchant, you don't have to pay the life cost, which allows you to go CI, which is kind of a fun way to do the build. But the enchant is only available on maces and scepters, so then we had to kind of work around that idea of like, okay, how do we scale damage with that? Because I didn't want to build myself a physical scepter or anything like that, so we had to go with a little bit of a ingenuity and ended up with going in stacking with a synthesis scepter that we put the roll on top of. And from there, we went ahead and stacked a bunch of int. Not even that much. The current version of this build has about 1100 int in it, and you could go very, very far from there onwards if you wanted to. Most people that know that int stackers can go well beyond 1100, but that was kind of just where I stopped because it was doing T17s alright, and I was having a lot of fun with the build, just bouncing around, having it be a nice casual thing. I didn't really go too hard on the build as a result, but I had very fun with it, so I wanted to make a little video about it, showcase what it does, and kind of how we built the build overall. So from there, we can dive right into the scepter. So this is the Insufficient Life doesn't prevent your melee attacks rune enchant that I got. So that means that even though I have a life cost of 124 and I have 1 life, I am still able to attack, as you see here, because we don't have to pay that life cost and it just gets ignored. From there, we're only paying the energy shield and the mana cost, which are still very high because Wild Strike of Extremes has a very high cost to it. So if you're going into that, that's something to keep in mind. But we put that on a synthesis scepter with 1 to 6 lightning damage to attacks per 10 int, and then we stack int. Like I said, I only got about 1100 int on this build. You can get more, way more. Int stackers can go very hard, so if you really like the playstyle and really like the build, you can scale way, way harder than I have done. From there, just rolled a normal little scepter with some attack speed, crit, and the lightning and cold damage on there. It was just essence lightning damage while I was rolling it, and then landed the crit and the attack speed with a cold resist on, or cold damage on there, put hits can't be evaded. Normally, you don't go hits can't be evaded on a build that has this much int because you have that node on the tree that can convert your intelligence into accuracy. Over here, where is it? No. Yeah, gain accuracy rating equal to your intelligence on the accuracy mastery. I'm a little frizzled today, don't mind me. So that's usually how you go, but for me, I went hits can't be evaded because I am going second sight, so that gives me the rest of the crit that I was kind of missing from the build. I was kind of stretched a little thin in some places, so I figured second sight would be a really easy way to crit cap, and it worked out like a charm because we can do hits can't be evaded on the scepter, so we can focus on crit, attack speed, all that good lightning damage, and of course then stacking that in. So that's very, very good for the build. This league, especially with int stacking and going something like a trickster, you do get a lot of potential from escape artists because the new body armors or necrotic armors can go really, really hard, really high on this. This is a very basic one. As you can tell, I don't have percent attributes on there. I just landed some intelligence, a bit of suppress, and then also a T4, a T1, and a crafted tier 3. Very, very basic. You can go way harder on a chest piece. These things roll absolutely insane. You can use recombobulators to make them, or you can do fractured stuff, all that stuff. If you're really interested in the build, really loving it, by all means, you can scale way harder than this. You've probably seen some of those posted around the internet. So very cool for this league to have both of these combinations, both the int stacking and then the runesmithing stuff. From there, it kind of builds how you would expect any build to build. We're just moving around the tree, picking up a bunch of stuff for crit, for spell suppression, a little bit of frenzy, a little bit of power charge. The frenzy is coming from the chest piece, so when we're standing in town, doing nothing, we go up to 7 charges from there. And then of course Ghost Reaver, Chaos Inoculation for CI, Ghost Reaver so we get that leech, get that overleech coming from Soul Drinker, and then we solve a little bit of our mana problems, the things like Clever Thief, and you would build this pretty much how you always build it. Realistically though, you'd probably be looking at doing another large cluster here, akin to something like this, where you're getting lightning damage, attack speed, intelligence, whatever have you from your big old cluster here. and then stacking that with something else. This should have been an energy shield instead of increased damage, but I ended up landing the increased damage, and I was just kind of not wanting to roll these anymore. Decent way to roll this for this build is to get yourself an intelligence fracture one. I self-fractured this one just because I was not wanting to pay the prices of those. But if you get yourself an intelligence fractured one and you roll with harvest for attack speed, for attacks, I mean, the only one you can get is the attack and cast speed with lightning skills on the lightning cluster, so it's actually pretty easy to roll your suffixes, and then you're just fishing for your prefixes. I got the 35% increased, and I slammed it with an Exalt Orb and got 4% damage. Not ideal, but works out just fine for me in terms of what I was looking. From there, just stacking some weird kind of attack speed crit multi stuff that you can find. It's maces, it's lightning damage. You can kind of get a weird hybrid of stuff. This one had Corrupting Blood. This one, because you have Wild Strike of Extremes, you can put on a bunch of the different types of damage, crit strike multipliers for cold, for lightning, for fire. All of them work for you, so you can kind of get whatever you need on that to get a very powerful set of jewels. Same thing with this one, very powerful set of jewels, just maces, scepters, crit multis, all that stuff. Not really valued by a lot of people because maces aren't, used by the vast majority of builds. So if you are looking to do that, it's very easy for you to get some of those pieces for cheap. Just more there as well, and then like I said, maybe dropping off some of this stuff and going over here for another giant cluster with more energy shield, and all that would be the rage. And speaking of rage, I got in an impossible scape over here to steal Resolute Technique. That gives me a bit more crit, and then for funsies, I got a little bit of rage on hit from here with 10 max rage. So if a battle is going a bit long and I need some more damage, this is scaling up in the background. It doesn't, ramp up very quickly, so it is a bit of a longer fight thing, and it's not something I'm going to count on for massive amounts of damage, but for most fights I'm averaging about 10 to 20, maybe sometimes 30 rage, so why not throw it in there just because it's an interesting way of progressing around the build. Other than that, this is literally just for second sight. There's a couple things here for elemental damages on these nodes, which is good because scaling both your lightning and your cold. That's pretty bog standard stuff, just a bunch of elemental damage rolls. You don't need those. You grab kind of whatever if you're going to go for this route with a second sight. Look for better ones, maybe look for a better placement, maybe somewhere else it's better, maybe you can get something better out of it, maybe you're scaling differently with the rest of your things. Because the rest of my gear is pretty straightforward. We're just looking at some things with intelligence and some ES on it. Very simple, very straightforward. Reduced mana cost of attacks because I was burning a lot of mana. Like I said, it is a very hefty build to use, 72 mana here. So if you want to, you're really going for these reduced mana cost things here. Some mana reservation efficiency. You want to get that leech, that insta leech. That way you're, popping yourself back up pretty quickly on both life and mana when you're hitting something, so you don't notice it as much. And then of course, evasion per intelligence, since you're stacking it. Very good for you. You can get yourself a decent chunk of evasion. If I pop my flask, I'm at nice 60k. Combined with Ghost Dance, you're going to pop up real quick when you take a hit. And of course, Spell Suppress capped on top of that with Immunity CI makes it a pretty good thing for, let's say, ultimatums where you have a lot of free rolls. This is a very nice ultimatum character. I do like doing ultimatums, so anytime I get to play CI and do some ultimatum and stuff, it's pretty fun. Overall, it's very straightforward in the rest of the gearing. You're going to be looking for some resistances, a bit of, whatever defenses you're going to get on there. That additional strikes is very handy. I was going to upgrade it, but I was kind of done with the character, so I stuck with a 1, didn't get to a 2. Same thing, belt, it's just intelligence, synthesis implicits. Pretty cheap, a lot of this stuff, this league, not a lot of people running it. Not a lot of people stacking ants, so you can get some of this stuff for fairly cheap, spam it with some essences, go from there. Same with the boots, just triple resistances to top myself off, because I was a little bit lacking on the rest of my gear, being that I was making most of this gear myself. And then the big thing you can really kind of utilize in a setup like this is all this mirrored gear that we're getting from the league currently, is you can get yourself really, really massive int rolls with wed rolls. Elemental damage with attacks and high intelligence rings are kind of everywhere. You can get a lot of them for pretty much no cost at all, and that's where you see that I needed all that resistances from, because this one's got minus 85 fire resist on it, but it's got 135 int and 100 increased elemental damage with attacks, so it's very good for this build. And you don't really notice a lot of the downsides being CI if you have minus life or little bits of minus mana and stuff like that. it's still just fine. The funny thing is that you can even get ones that have the evasion rating as a -14, and then combine that with, let's say, the increased maximum energy shield if both rings have explicits. I think that works. Some people have said this is glitched, then the evasion rating actually isn't counted down, which is completely possible as to why this 10% reduced evasion here isn't hurting me at all. So be careful when you look at some of them, but you can get, like this one, 75 all attributes, 95 wed. Very nice little pieces of gear across the board for what you can pick up for very cheap, because we do have the Calandra mirrors kind of dropping random little things that people are not really valuing too heavily for something like this, because most people aren't running something like this. So great way to use the cheap rings to great effect on a build like this. And then for the normal stuff in terms of linkage, we're moving around with Leap Slam, Steel Skin, Duration with Automation, just to have that popping off nonstop in the background. Frost Shield, Sigil Power, just you slap them down and start swinging. You have a lot of ES, you're burning a lot of mana. It's a little bit more damage. It doesn't always work out, bosses move, stuff like that happens, but hey, it's another layer that you can put into the build and gives you a little bit more defenses. Mark on hit, Assassin's Mark, probably enhance if you want to put it in there to make it so it's better. You got yourself more crit, more power charge generation, things of that nature, as you would assume. Enlighten for Purity of Elements, Discipline, and Grace. You don't need Enlighten 4, you could just get a little bit more reservation efficiency on the helmet, which I kind of just ignored, and just drop out the Enlighten, you'll be good to go. I just happen to have an Enlighten 4 from the beginning of the league that I just kind of use on all my characters. You don't necessarily need it. You can get by with different ways of doing reservation, whether it's on your chest, whether it's on your helmet, whatever you have, you can come up with a different way of doing that if that's something you're going to be interested in. And as far as links for Wild Strike of Extremes, I would say that the rest of them, wed, increased crit damage, which I should probably flip at some point. Damage on full life, you're always considered full life as you have 1 HP. And multi-strike, those are kind of locked in. Energy Shield Leech is a bit weird. I think it's supposed to be working with Overleech and it's supposed to be giving me the damage. I think it's correct. As far as we understood from the math, I should be getting more back fast enough to still be counted at full because of mathematical reasons. I'm not entirely sure about that whole aspect of things, but for me, it's been fine. It's been a lot of leech. I still, get more damage while I'm leeching, all that stuff, and it pops me up really quickly, letting me to kind of AFK my mind and not really worry about it too much. So that's a link that might be changeable within the build, but that's going to be up to your discretion. And like I said, if you really like the build, if you like the playstyle, by all means, you can push it a lot harder. 1100 int is almost nothing as far as int stacking is concerned. And it's been really fun. It's been a really fun build to do. I'm very happy that I decided to chuck this on a scepter and go and have it a try. And the synthesis scepter for instacking was indeed the correct choice, because I didn't have to make very fancy scepters. Just kind of stuck something in there and it ended up working out really well. So I'm very happy with the build. If you're interested in it, do check it out. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Other than that, though, I hope you enjoy. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.